Oh, hi. I see people from Bloomington. I see people from Beijing.
Hi.
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 Hi, Faridah.
So we're going to start now. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. If you want to comment on anything, please write in the chat and we'll try to respond. And so the discussion today, I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the focus of our discussion. And so again, thank you for joining us today. This is our first time using Zoom with you. And so we're excited as well to see how it works.
Faridah?
Yes?
Excuse me, Faridah. Might just have a few words before you start formally.
Sure.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, welcome everyone to this session, to this morning session at Beijing time, but at night session at IU, Bloomington time. So thank you so much for Professor Faridah Pawan to give us this kind of interactive speech, which is on pedagogy on online education. So as we all, I think it is unusual for us to meet in this way, online way, due to the coronavirus disease. I'm sure that everyone experienced the impact of this disease on our lives and work. And I guess for the teachers, both in China and abroad, we can just, we have to have all of our things online. Like we will have courses, we will supervise our students online, which is unfamiliar to us because we haven't done this quite often in the past. So at the same time, it will also become, maybe some of them, they don't feel confident in doing so. For example, like me, but some of the teachers may think that it is all about the technology. But yeah, as we can see, as we will see, there's another big issue. There's another crucial issue, which is pedagogy, which is more important or equally important as technology. So today, this session will be just how can I say, open, or will be arranged by CTER, Center for Teacher Education Research at Beijing Normal University. We are honored to just invited our old friend Faridah to give us a kind of, it's not like a monologue, speech. It's a kind of interactive speech. So there are a lot of list of questions here. They just prepared. They may just you may think that these are the problems that I'm facing with, or maybe some other problems. So we will experience this, how the pedagogy online really like from this speech. So let's welcome Faridah Pawan, Professor Faridah Pawan from IU. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Pei. And we are also extremely glad to be here and very honored that you have invited us. And so I think with me, I welcome you to this session, to our Zoom session. And I also want to acknowledge that we have folks here from Indiana University. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to share my screen so that you see what I'm going to talk about. Right? And so I'm going to do that right now so that it's not just my face that you see, but you also see the screen of my PowerPoint. And so this is my screen, and I'm going to put it in mode. So can you guys see that, everyone?
Yes. Yes, we can see clearly.
Fantastic. And so, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. And allow me to begin by saying that along with me are two of my doctoral students, Renee, Renee Hsin and Chao, and join me as co-facilitators because their research is on online teacher education. And so I should also say that there other of my doctoral students who've joined me here as well, including Natalia, Xing and Feng Dong, who are also with me in a research team. They'll be joining us as well. But Chao and Hsin will be the facilitators as we approach this. And so I begin, as you know, I am professor of ESL, EFL teacher education. Now, Hsin, can you talk a little bit about your research?
Me?
Yes.
Okay. In Chinese or English? Sure. So my dissertation looks at how second language writers write together to produce a single piece of writing. And I am looking at how to use this kind of method, technology-mediated collaborative writing activities in face-to-face class, and how we can use this as an instructional strategy to scaffold the student into their individual writing, like the bigger piece of individual writing assignment. Yeah.
And you're doing that online and face-to-face, a combination.
Right, yeah. Technology mediated, but in the face-to-face setting.
Mm-hmm. So thank you. Chao, you want to talk a little bit about your dissertation?
Yeah, so my dissertation is about online English language learning in rural remote areas in China. So I studied a school in southwestern China. So looking at the primary school students, their online interactions with the online teacher, and also with their perceptions and feelings about online language learning. So it's the kind of English online class is video conferencing based. So synchronous is very like what we are having now. So it's a Zoom based, yeah, video conferencing based.
Video conferencing based, fantastic. Mm-hmm. So they're here also to kind of help me with making sure that I'm on track. Mm-hmm. So now one of the things that this is what the session today is a conversation. It's not a lecture. And so the way we're going to do this is we're going to have a lot of back and forth, and hopefully you can join in, because if it's just a lecture, we'll put you to sleep. And so we're hoping for a back and forth. And so primarily also the reason is that, you know, this form of instruction, you know, it's an emergency situation whereby we learn as we go. So we have to kind of do it together. And so I just want to kind of bring this expression, you know, in a sense that we cannot do this alone. We're learning as we go. So I love these proverbs. One bee cannot make honey, one grape make a meal, and when spiders unite, they can tie up a lion. So these are some of my favorite sayings, and I'm saying this also because we are learning together. And so we hope that this conversation, what emerges from it, is a good form of sharing. And a lot of what I'm going to say also is based on a book that I had written with a few other people. I was the lead author on this. And the argument for this book is pedagogy and not technology should be driving online instruction, because one of the things that happens is that, you know, when you are asked to teach online, when teachers are first getting online, one of the things that happens is that they say, oh, we're not ready because I don't know technology. And we hope the discussion today, you know, will get into the idea that it's not that technology that is the main focus. Technology is there to help, but we have to get our pedagogy in. And what is that pedagogy? And that's what we're going to talk about the most today. Now, we are also, before I go on, focusing on language teacher educators such as yourself. And so we're talking in terms of being educators, language teacher educators. And this is what this is. All right, any questions before we go? Okay, if you do, just post someone in the chat room so we can see it. Okay, so now some of you may know this picture, some of you may not. It's from the movie, American classic movie called Wizard of Oz. And what it is that, you know, these are people who are trying to find their way, and they are looking for the magician, that's behind the screen. And that's like us teachers, right? Behind the screen, behind the curtain. That's what online teachers are about. And so this is why I brought up this picture. But in any case, you know, when we talk about pedagogy, you know, why is it important? Pedagogy is something, what is pedagogy? You know, why should we be talking about pedagogy in terms of online teaching? Pedagogy is important because it helps us figure out what's worthwhile teaching, what's worthwhile doing in our classroom. And in essence, that's what pedagogy is. It defines what counts as knowledge. You know, what we see as important in terms of what we do in the classroom, in terms of what needs to be engaged in. And what, you know, the reason we're in the classroom, why are we using all these tools? Because it all impacts learning. And so this is what pedagogy is. Any questions about what pedagogy is, what your conceptualization of pedagogy is? Any thoughts? Okay, I'm going to stop here for a minute because one of the things that I want to ask about is when you first started teaching, when you were forced to, or what not forced, when you were asked to teach online, what were the things that you were hearing from teachers? The things that we heard first was, I'm afraid of teaching because I don't know enough about technology. What did you hear from your teachers when you said, well, you have 3 weeks to go online, now or never, right? What were some of the things that you were hearing from teachers? Any thoughts, any words that you heard? You can type it out. Renee, what were some of the things that you heard when we were given less than 2 weeks to get online?
I saw a question from our audience right here. Oh, is it Professor? Is it pedagogy a relation? Is pedagogy a relationship between learning and teaching? What's the relationship between?
What's the relationship between pedagogy, learning and teaching? Pedagogy is, you know, the relationship between teaching and learning, what pedagogy is that the question? Technically, pedagogy, you as a teacher determining what is worthwhile for students to learn. Where do you want to take students to? So as a teacher, pedagogy is what's doing that, right? And it should lead to learning, obviously, but the decision as to what knowledge, what's worthwhile to know, what's worthwhile doing in the classroom, right? What's worthwhile engagements in the classroom, that all defines pedagogy. Obviously, it has to lead to learning, otherwise why do it, right? But you have to, and the decision is the same. When you go online, why use all these tools online? What are you using Zoom? Why are you using Wiechart? Right? It's not just Wiechart doing anything, but why are you in there? Why are you using Zoom, for example? So that's the connection between, that's what pedagogy is. It is the umbrella, you know, it is the engine that pushes teaching, that underlies teaching and learning.
And we have another question. I think it's a great question. I also had that question before. How do we apply the theory we learn to our teaching practices? It's a very broad question, but I think many of us had this question. We wanted to try something, but then we don't know.
Yeah, you know, the question about theory comes in all the time. But let's walk through a little bit about pedagogy in terms of online teaching, and we'll come back to pedagogy, because pedagogy to some extent is a theory. It's a theory of what's worth learning, what's worth teaching, what's worth doing in the classroom. Yeah. So let's go back again to the slides. Yeah. Share. And so, you guys see this? So when you look at pedagogy, what kinds of questions come to mind, right? These are some of the pedagogical questions. Why are we using online tools? How do they align with what we want to achieve in language teaching? How do they align with what value in teaching? How do the tools that we use in online teaching support student growth and achievement? Do the tools align with what we're learning, how we view learning at this point? Because the way we think about learning in terms of online teaching has changed, right? Do they support the types of, do the tools support the relationship between our students and ourselves? These are pedagogical questions. These are the things that define what pedagogy is. And as you can see, it defines all of teaching and all of learning. And so, other questions that you want to raise that you see relevant at this point in time?
We got several new questions in the box, and one of them is how do we do the effective evaluation of the online pedagogy?
How do we evaluate online pedagogy?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's do it now. Let's in answering the questions. I mean, those are great questions that you asked. How do we evaluate pedagogy? Let's continue our discussion and see whether that question can be answered. So I'm going to share my screen again. So everybody sees it? So here we go.
Yes.
How do the tools, so these questions, to some extent are assessing our online pedagogy, okay? How do the tools align with what we know as effective in language teacher education? This is a question to assess our pedagogy. One of the things about online teaching is that it has changed the conceptualization of what is effective teaching. And one of the concepts here, one of the things that has emerged from online teaching is the difference between teacher presence and teaching presence. And what is the distinction, right? And if you look at teacher presence is on the far right. It is direct instruction. It's like here, us being here, right? It's what we do as a teacher in the classroom, face-to-face, immediate, right now, live in the classroom. In online teaching, we make a distinction between teacher presence and teaching presence. And teaching presence in online teaching has now set a much bigger role. It is the design, it's the facilitation, it's engaging students, it's readying our classroom so that when students come into the classroom, they can take charge of their own learning, because we cannot always be there. We are not always there. Students' self-directed learning is so much more important because students come into, they have access to online tools on their own. They do a lot of work outside of our classrooms, right? Informal and formal learning are juxtaposed. And so teaching presence, the design of our classes so that when students come in, they can take charge of their own learning. That's a huge part right now of online instruction versus being directly in the classroom, facing students and talking to them like we are now. So the division between teacher presence and teaching presence has become very, very huge at this point in time. Chao and Renee, you want to take over and explain and reaffirm that?
Teaching presence, can I maybe speak in Chinese? Yeah. Teaching presence, 我觉得就是主要是指上教师自己在这个课堂中的一个角色，老师要做什么样的事情，达到什么样的目标，他要去设计、去思考如何在这个过程中去引导学生，如何去辅助他们，提供所需要的这个帮助，然后比如说去 model student 学生，然后他们应该怎么做，然后让他们在这个过程中慢慢学会去自己独立的去学习，然后这就是其中的一个目标，也就是老师考虑自己在这个课堂中的一个角色，而不仅仅是像老师 teacher presence， 就是老师在场，老师出现在课堂里，老师直接做什么事情，就是这两个的一个区别。Maybe Renee, you want to add?
就是在课堂的设计吧，就是在怎么设计活动啊，怎么设计他们的课程，然后怎么安排这些思考的部分，就是属于 teaching presence 的部分。
can't do it in Spanish. We have a I'm just nodding here to Natalia, who's also one of my doctoral students, and we have another one, Faisal, in Bahasa Indonesia. So thank you. So the idea, somebody has a comment?
Yes, I do have something. To the explanation of the two students, they are talking about the design and about the activities, but I think that offline teaching, offline education will do the same thing, but we have to make sure the particularity of online teaching. So what is so different to those offline offline teaching in those kind of design, in those kind of activities. I heard that Faridah just mentioned about the self-directed learning. To my understanding, it is a kind of high order thinking to both students and for us adult teachers. So how we can make sure that everyone has the ability, has a consciousness to do self-directed learning. Yeah.
Perfect question, because it segues into our next, our next discussion slide. And one of the things that I do want to reiterate is that, before I go on, is that the distinction between teacher presence and teaching presence is huge now in online teaching. When we talk about online teaching, now we talk about teaching presence rather than teacher presence. That's something I want to reiterate at this point in time and bring to fore. Now, Pei Laosher asked about how do we bring this forward? What does this look like in terms of online teaching, or what are the ways, right? And so, when we talk about this, we talked about enacting online presence. I'll give you a few examples, right? And I think I'll give you maybe 2 or 3, and I'll show you a few of them. These are some of the major ways of doing it. And so, for instance, one of them is role enactment. And so as a teacher educator, if you're having pre-service or in-service teachers and they're engaging on, one of the things to enact teaching presence is not so much teaching, being right there and telling them what to do, but giving them the responsibilities in the engagement. And so one of them is through role enactment. And you see some of these things that's happening here in my classroom. What do I mean by role enactment? Role enactment is giving, when people are, for instance, here, we have here in the classroom, you give them, specific roles when they come into the online classroom. So that, for instance, the typical ones are like starter. When you come into the classroom, as a student, as a teacher, you start the conversation, you've read something. Now you come in the classroom, know that if your role is the starter, you're supposed to start the conversation. If your role is the provocateur, when you get online, you are bringing in counter evidence, right? Or if your role is the wrapper, what you do is that you pull together information from elsewhere and the readings into the discussion, so that when students come online, they're not coming online to wait for you to say anything, but they're coming in knowing they have certain roles to play in that classroom, right? And that's a form of self-directed learning. They're taking ownership of the learning. Now, I have a colleague here, some of you may already know him, Kurt Wang, and he has a lot of roles, right? And these are some of the roles that you can kind of develop. You as a teacher educator can come up with all these roles that are pertinent to your engagement, to what you value in the classroom. But the bottom line is that you're essentially setting this up. Your teaching presence is setting this up so that when students come into the classroom, they immediately know what to do. They're taking charge of that classroom, right? And because online, you're not there. You're putting it together so that they know what to do. So that's one form of the enactment of teaching presence. Another form is that when students come in, one of the things through research, we've found this to be effective. When they come into an online class, into discussion, for instance, they self-code, meaning they code, they tell us, everyone in the classroom, what are they doing in the classroom, right? And so, of course, that's really hard to do unless you provide them with support. For example, we have this practical inquiry model, and it's based on the community of inquiry. And so this is also known as cognitive presence, whereby you take the students, you help students see the stages of learning. So for instance, if they're coming in and they're just asking questions, for instance, right? Or they have a problem. So they self-code what they want to say, or what their engagement in the classroom. They say, okay, I'm challenged. I don't know these, or whatever it is. And then, or if they're coming in to explore an idea, they have to self-code. Self-code means they have to self-identify. What are they doing, or what are they saying in that online classroom? So again, as you can see, you're creating the space so that students know how they can engage, or what stages you're providing them, stages of engagement, guidance of engagement. It's teaching presence. You're not telling them what to say, because you might or might not be there, but you're taking them through the stages of inquiry. And by getting them to identify for themselves, why are they in that classroom, right? Are they exploring? Are they integrating? Are they trying to connect ideas from what other people have said in the classroom? Or do they want to report, for instance, ideas that they've talked in the classroom, they've seen it worked elsewhere? What are they sharing in terms of resolution? How are these ideas playing out in real life? So self-coding means when students come into an online classroom, they declare, they say, they self-code, they self-declare what is it that they're doing in that classroom. That's another form of teaching presence. It's a very high level form, but you're teaching teachers, right? They should be able to do this, because you are pushing, this is valuable to you in the classroom, that teachers take ownership, that they're pushing themselves learning, and you're helping them push learning in an online context. And so now in terms of, so those are two examples of how you enact teaching presence. Are there any questions thus far? I see a few examples here. What is the essence? What the essence of difference? I hope you saw in terms of what we've shown examples. We talked about teaching presence, and I've shown you two ways of how you might enact teaching presence. Okay. All right. Any questions? Anything before we go on? Okay. Let me share with you again my screen. So the next pedagogical question is that how do we take advantage of the tools to promote what we value in teaching? Now, just now, if you value teaching presence, if you value students taking ownership, the online medium is the perfect medium because it allows you to, let me see, time to deliberate, right? It's perfect for reflective teaching, in a sense, because the information, if you're dealing with asynchronous information, right, the information is captured there and it gives people time to think. One of the things that has come out for research, online engagement from students tend to be more substantive and thoughtful than just open-ended discussion in the classroom, because people can raise their hand and say, oh, that's a good point. But when you are in terms of online teaching, when people are talking online, what you put out there stays there for a while and can be reflected upon for a while. And so therefore, research has shown that what is talked about in online discussion tends to be more substantive. There's more thoughtfulness that goes into that because students are more accountable, can be held more accountable for what they say, but they also have more time to be accountable. And so reflective teaching has become very, very huge in online teaching, right? Reflective pedagogy, because there is time, because there is an ability now for people to reflect more in terms of what they have to say. And as a teacher educator, one of the things that I use it for is that when I teach, part of my online teaching is also something called self-storing, which is as I'm teaching, I'm telling people behind the scene, I'm typing up, I'm letting them know what I'm doing in the classroom, so that they understand my grand design as a teacher educator, because I have the facility online to communicate with my students in an asynchronous fashion. I can tell them behind the scene as we're learning, what am I doing? What am I trying to achieve in this classroom? So part of teaching presence is also being able to share your grand design as students are learning with you. And this is one of the important capacity of online teaching. And so before I go on, anything else to add to that, Chao or Renee? Or questions?
We have a question. How do we prepare? This is more about the previous section about the different roles teachers and students might take on in online education. So how do we prepare students for these like multiple roles in online courses?
Right, right. How do we prepare? I mean, you think, again, going back to your own pedagogical stance, what's most valuable to you in the classroom? For me, what's most valuable for me when I think about those roles, right? I want students to be able to, like for instance, the traditional role of starter, provocateur, and wrapper. It's most important to me that, students are able to bring in counter evidence. And so the role of provocateur is very important, because I want them to be able to, as they're talking to me, I want them to be able, or to the class, I want them to be able to identify what has not been said in the classroom, right? And so the provocateur role is very important. But again, this goes back to your pedagogy. What is most valuable in the classroom? What do you want, where do you want to take students to? For me, I put in the role of the provocateur because I want students to draw in information from real life. Provocateur means you bring up evidence that we have not read. And so I create that role for that classroom. Yeah? Okay?
Yes.
We're cool? All right. So, I'm a teacher, I could talk forever unless So I just want to, in full disclosure here, I just want to tell you, interrupt so that I don't talk forever and put you to sleep, right? And so the other pedagogical question, the first pedagogical we ask is that, are the tools aligned with what we value? The other is that, is it aligned to what is now valued in what is now termed as effective language, effective teaching? One of the things that online has changed is that we make a clear distinction between teaching presence and teacher presence. The other question that we want to ask now is that, are we using the medium in ways that support our teacher growth, our student growth? And this is something that we ask even when we do face-to-face. But now when you think about online, how are we doing that? Are we doing that online? Or are we just using tools because they're available? Right? And so the idea of scaffolding, and I know Pei and I have talked a lot about scaffolding. This is what scaffolding is. When you teach online, you're not teaching, you're scaffolding. You're not teaching, you're teaching via scaffolding, you're supporting. You're not, as we say in English, you're not sage on the stage, but you are guide on the side. Because students have all the information they want online, right? How you support that engagement with the material online is what scaffolding is. And you can see the picture here. And so one of the things we talk about in terms of online teaching is hard and soft scaffolding. And so hard scaffolding is providing students things that are, that students need so that they can do the work. And if you think about teaching presence, this is where we come in. You provide what students need so they can do the work, right? Conceptual strategic roadmaps. Soft scaffolding is just in time, providing timely support, right, for students. So it's dynamic, it's situational, it's individualized. And I think, Chao, you want to talk about this a little bit more, perhaps in Chinese, as to the difference?
好的, yeah, okay. So, hard scaffolding, 可以理解为就是给足学生那个 一个大的框架和指导，然后告诉学生在这个网络的课堂里边，你应该怎么样去参与，然后怎么样去学习。比如说告诉学生每一种比如说这个角色你是比如说这周是你要 wrap up， 或者是你要去 facilitate， 然后你要去做什么，他的工作的话，你告诉学生一个具体的一个整个的指导，然后这个在循序渐进的过程中，他们就知道你这个课程整个是一个什么样的框架。然后 soft scaffolding 的话，就是在你具体的每一次学习的过程中，你给一个学生具体一个目标，一个具体的学习的这一周的目标或者下一周的目标，告诉他们每一周如果出现了有什么问题，然后给予他们及时的帮助。一个是一个大的框架，一个是一个小的和timely support。主要就是通过这种足够的支援，然后促进学生的学习，告诉他们这种线索和提示，也就是告诉他们如何去通过你的这种知识和你的指导去解决学习中的问题，然后培养他们自己一个独立的去解决能力的问题，还有自己独立在这个网络的课程中学习的一种能力。
What she said.
我可以补那个像例子，比如说 hard scaffolding 的话，当老师在给学生一个作业的给他们一个 task， 好，给一个任务，那个任务描述的，他们需要做什么，然后他们最后需要达成什么学习目标等等这些。description 有这些叙述的部分，然后学生明白这个任务，像这些部分的话就是 hard scaffolding 的部分。那当学生在做这个任务的过程当中，他可能会遇到一些问题，然后他遇到这个困难以后，老师从中间去提供他们及时的一些辅助。在这个过程当中，老师提供的这些部分就是 soft scaffolding 的部分。对，
我能就是在。我也不知道叫强调还是不是我可以理解，比如说 hard scaffolding 就是我们所说的一种预设，已经预设好的，比如说我把这个活动已经一步一步的已经做好了，包括每一个活动我要怎么去安排学生去怎么样，这个是预设的，这个是 hard。 soft 的话就是生成的，就是在过程当中，那么某一个学生或者某一个环节出现了一些学生可能在这过程当中出现了一些什么有一些什么样的需要，有一些什么样需要我的这个 support， 那我在现场去给的一些 soft scaffolding， 是这个意思吗？
对，我觉得这个很好。
我也觉得。Should we turn this question to Faridah? So, Professor Pei, right? She said she wants to confirm if hard scaffolding is the setup of a task or an assignment or any kind of instructional activity, and that's already set up for the students before they take on the task. And soft scaffolding is emerging issues during the process, and that's when the teacher jump in and provide them facilitation. So she wants to confirm if that's the correct understanding.
Yeah, I think, right on the ball there and right on target there. And so allow me to answer that question by showing an example, right? And so, for instance, if you're teaching teachers how to teach, say, writing, and you take process writing as an example, and so the writing, if you're teaching online, right, and you're trying to teach writing or teach teachers how to teach writing to students, and so if you think about process writing, if teaching the idea of teaching writing through process writing, and so in a sense, if you think about process writing, you just don't ask them to write. They go through stages of pre-writing, writing, responding, revising, editing, and publishing. This is process writing. So in terms of hard and soft scaffolding, what does that mean? The hard scaffolding for, are all of these, for instance, right? You set up the description, you set up the sample papers, you set up places for them to, to discuss the requirements. And then you set up blocks for them to reflect, right? This is, this is hard scaffolding. Soft scaffolding, this is when you come in and your peer, or if you set up peer review, when you engage in terms of what's happening with the work itself, right? It's just in time support, in the sense that, you are responding specifically to their specific questions. You're providing specific feedback. You're not giving instructions. You're not giving materials. You're not setting up the requirements, but you are responding to the work itself, to the individual, queries, to the individual challenges. That's what self-scaffolding is. And so when you're teaching, so there's that difference between hard scaffolding and self-scaffolding. Hard scaffolding is what you set up, like you set up a website, for instance, for students to go and figure out what they need to do, right? And then once they are doing it, how do you, respond to specific questions, specific issues? That's soft scaffolding, right? And if you look at the tools that we have online, for instance, when you have forums, right, discussion forums, and I'm not sure what you're using, we use Canvas, for instance. This is when they can brainstorm. This is when also the forums can also be a place where you put the hard scaffolding, you put all the instructions down. You use blogs, for instance, for students to start thinking about their writing or start putting in drafts about their writing. And then you use wikis, for instance, for students to share and have peers engage in what they're writing. So in essence, you see hard scaffolding and soft scaffolding play out. But with the online tools, the pedagogically in your head, process writing is what's most valuable to me. So to engage students in process writing, because I value that in my classroom, I'm using these tools, right, for hard scaffolding and soft scaffolding, right? Does that respond to your question, Professor Pei?
Yes, that's what I thought. Which is hard scaffolding is most set up in advance, but while soft scaffolding is more emergent, as it's just one of your students mentioned, and your concept is like responding online or responding on time. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. I think we do the same thing offline, right?
We do the same. We should be doing the same thing on offline because we value that, right? But what's different about online is that now you have the tools. You have forums, right? You have, people ask, why are we using forums? Why are we using blogs? Why are we using wikis, right? Pedagogically, those online tools have to make sense if you want to use them. And if you're going to teach online, you have to make sense of why you want to use forums on blogs and wikis. You have to have that pedagogical insight, right? Otherwise, they're just tools. So that's why we're talking about them. So now so let's now move on to another slide. That's a great question, Pei Lao Shi. And so other questions along those lines as I continue to share?
Can I ask your thought?
Oh.
Okay.
See, my own students getting me into trouble.
No.
All right, go ahead. You can ask the forum. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, in the chat box? What?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So as we talk about this, I was wondering if you see any relationship between learning presence, teacher presence, and the hard scaffolding and soft scaffolding. Okay. So it sounds like hard scaffolding will be where the teaching presence can be observed, and then soft scaffolding is when the teacher presence can be more observed, but I'm not sure if you see any relationship between those two separate concepts.
That's an excellent point. Say it again.
So do you see any relationship between the two sets of concept, the teacher presence and teaching presence, in relation to hard scaffolding and soft scaffolding, where they emerge.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of hard scaffolding and soft scaffolding, in terms of teaching, you know, they're both, you know, hard scaffolding obviously is teaching presence, right? I mean, you have to kind of set it up. Teacher presence, soft scaffolding can be teacher presence, but you know, there are also ways whereby you can set it up so that peers can get involved, right? So that peers can go into the wiki, right? And you know, guide the writing so that, you know, so in essence, you know, how, you know, teaching presence is always there because you've already set it up, you know, so that students can do it themselves and so that you can come in if you need to directly assist. But that all goes back to your teaching presence, your sense of where pedagogically this is going. Yeah? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to share again my slide here. So as we go on, and so one of the other pedagogical questions that we have to ask is, do the online tools align with how we view learning at this point in time, right? And you know, the conception of learning when, you know, the online domain has come about has changed in terms of what are we doing with learning. One of the ideas, and I'm sure you've heard as well, is the idea of connectivism, right? A learning theory now that has become, that is now more, just like teaching presence, connectivism is becoming more and more prominent as a learning theory. So connectivism is about connecting and forming networks. So it's more the concept of learning through connecting. It's not content. Let me see. Let me show you this. It's distributive learning, connective learning. Each point, each node is a point of learning. We're not talking about content here, but connections are more important than content. Being able to identify how you can connect to seek information is knowledge itself. You know, we're not talking about, you know, finding, you know, a static information. It's more connecting with ideas, or with more likely with people who have ideas. It's now is more it's becoming more and more of a highly valued form of engagement in terms where learning is concerned. And so you know, to give you an example, right? Personal learning networks, so the three types. And here, you know, I'm going to share with you a little bit about, you know, research, a little bit to show you what teachers are saying about how they're learning. But before I do that, I want to give you an example. I want to explain how we can see the idea of connectivism through personal learning networks. Now, in the US, personal learning networks are these, for example. I'm just going to run through them very quickly. Synchronous connection, you know, these are examples of what we do. Semi-synchronous, these are examples of what we do. They occur in conversations. And then like Twitter and Facebook and all those things, which I know, you know, in China is different. Asynchronous are, you know, things like this. And so Chao, can you talk about these in terms of what's available in China?
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the synchronous connections and semi-synchronous connections, so personally, I used a lot of the Wiechart 公众号, Wiechart official account. So so for those who are language educators, you might, I'm more familiar with Unipa's teacher development. 就是外研社的那个教师发展公众号, they have free webinars and paid webinars, so they have a lot of information about teaching and research, and they invited speakers from Chinese universities and abroad. So that one I used a lot, and also 知乎 discussions So I think a lot of young people like to use Zhihuan. They most of their discussions are pretty well written, and they cited a lot of good articles and references as well. So Weibo discussion, I haven't used them, but I hear some people probably use that. And also 中国大学慕课国家精品课 中国高校外语慕课平台 so those ones I also use. So as to the asynchronous tools that Faridah mentioned, so the 网络收集书网络书收签收那个功能我没有用过，但是我知道有2个比较好用的 tool， 就是36阵和 Pinbox， 那2个是我知道现在用的比较多的，其他的一些so you're also welcome to share what are the connections that you use in the chat box, so for everyone to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I can also type in the chat box those tools that I just mentioned.
Yeah. The reason I brought this up, right, and you know, and I appreciate the fact that Chao said young people, meaning I'm not very young here. Enjoy those sites too. But the reason, you know, that we're sharing this is that I want to highlight that in terms of online teacher education, the idea of connectivism is important. And those are examples of some of the things that we use that show you how teachers are enacting connectivism. Let me give you an example. In terms, this is actual research. And so PLN, personal learning networks, are those networks, are Weibo and all, Twitter and Facebook, all those things exemplifies connectivism. So for instance, you know, here, this is from research, you know, this is a teacher talking, the PLN, you know, like Weibo and all that, connection just made me smarter. Everyone, every node in the network is as smart as all the other nodes, as any node. So he's saying is that the way I learn, right, is by making this connecting. It makes me smarter to be connected, right? This is how I'm learning. This is how I'm professionally developing. This is my teacher learning. When I'm able to connect with other teachers in 89 countries, it makes me feel smarter. It makes me feel knowledgeable, right? So notice it's not I go to the library, I open a book, I read all these things. It's connecting, right? The other example, another from a teacher. I like my blog because it's an easy place for me to write down. It's informal. I can put my thoughts down to others, right? For others to see and for others to comment on, for others to engage. This is what I learned. This is how I learn, right? By sharing and by having others connect with what I'm learning. This is another form of connectivism that is valued now. It's a form of learning that is highly valued. The other is, the other example that exemplifies connectivism is the idea of how flat this is. Everybody can join in. I feel like what's really amazing is that even big names or people that are really experienced are willing to come in and help, right? And so somebody was talking, you know, on their Twitter account, and suddenly some of you may know who Krashen is. He's very famous in language teaching and learning, and he's in there as well. But everybody's in there. The learning is flat, meaning experienced, not experienced, veteran, more knowledgeable, everybody is there. And connectivism is being able to have this flattened communication and learning, right? And so this is the form of learning whereby everybody engages, whereby you have direct connection to experts, whereby experts are connecting with you. This is what's valued now in online teaching. The facility of the, you know, of what we have enables us to do this. And so the other thing also about connectivity, about the idea of learning through connectivism, is that not only what's important is something called the 4 C's. Not only are you consuming information that you know, like traditionally, I'm go online, I get information. But the other thing about connectivism is that you're able to connect, like I mentioned before. But more importantly, what's new here is that you are also, you know, learning through creating and contributing. but it's also important for me to be able to seek out new ideas for myself, or even create new ideas, not just be a consumer, but also a producer of ideas, right? And this is, at this point in time, you know, with online instruction, with online language teacher education, the idea that, right, of connectivism as a form of teacher learning is becoming more, it's not becoming, it's our reality at this point in time, right? It's valued, it's not static knowledge that we're looking for, but the idea of being able to engage, to connect with others, and on top of it all, to be able to produce, and that is a form of learning now. And so, to some extent, right, and I don't know whether I can enlarge this anymore. If you think about language teacher professional development, you know, if you, Darling Hammond, you all might probably know her because she's a very, very famous name in language teacher, in teacher education. Traditionally, when you talk about teacher learning, teacher professional development, right? But what makes effective teacher professional development is that, you know, when you go into, say, a workshop, you know, it has to have content. It has to have good models of effective practice, right? Or it allows for sustain, meaning it's not short, just one piece, one night workshop, but you know, it happens throughout the year, sustained learning. And it offers room for teachers to reflect and to collaborate. When you think about online teaching, that concept of what good professional development has changed, right? What teachers want now is just not sustained, you know, or long in duration. They want just in time. They want help as they need it. JITT, just in time, not just in case, right? Just in case I need it and I need to learn now. They don't, that kind of help is not what teachers are. They want just in time. They want what I'm experiencing the problem. Therefore, I want to seek help, and that help has to be just in time. The other thing is what I said earlier, you know, professional development workshops, all those trainings, you know, in the olden days, you go to a training, you want content, you want information. But what is valued now is connectivity, being able to connect with others, being able to not just connect, but also to contribute and create. That's a form of learning that's most meaningful because the online medium allows for it, right? And so, you know, it goes on and on, but I just want to show you two of the major examples of how the online medium has reconceptualized what is effective what is effective professional development, what is considered as valued in learning, in teacher learning, etc. Right? Now it's almost 10 o'clock. Before I go on, other questions that come up from this reconceptualization? Any thoughts about how online teaching has reconceptualized what you think is good professional development? You know, you are all teacher educators, right? With this online medium coming in or having to do things online, how has it reconceptualized your idea as to what you can offer to teachers? Okay, the two I mentioned just now was, you know, professional development has to be just in time, not just in case. The other is that it allows teachers to, you know, to have connectivity, right? Not just content, right? The other is that the other way that we could, professional development, teacher professional development is reconceptualized is that you have to engage teachers in self-directed learning, like teaching presence. They know what to do when they come into the classroom, right? It allows teachers also not just to collaborate, but, you know, to learn, but to also co-create, contribute, right? These are the types of online professional development that's you know, the way the online medium has reconceptualized what is considered effective and meaningful, I should say, professional development. Any thoughts you want to add to some of these?
Teachers probably are more active. They take charge on their own development.
Mm-hmm.
They do it their own way.
Hi, Faridah. Yeah.
Hi. Like, I mean, they do it their own way. They find their own ways, like involving in various communities, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's,
yeah.
I mean, they no longer wait for others to tell.
Yeah, there's something called hyotogogi, which is, you know, another aspect of pedagogy, in a sense that when teachers come into the classroom, they don't think the facilitators like us have all the answers. The expectation is that we don't. But the expectation is that they can bring something to the classroom so that they can connect with others who are like them. You know, they don't expect facilitators like us to have the answers, but they expect us to be able to set it up so that they can connect with others, so that they can share what they've got, right, with others. And so that's a good point, Faisal. Other thoughts in China, in Beijing, are normal? Thoughts about how the online medium has reconceptualized the type of professional development that you're offering. Renee and Chao, you want to chime in?
Can I just like have a word? I'm Dorcas. So I kind of think about the affordance of different technologies online instruction or instructors might use. Kind of like if we have, for example, webcamming, we have chat boards just like this. We have whiteboards that can write on, we have slides, and we are like having eye contacting with students, or we're trying to engage them in after class discussion boards. How to coordinate all those diverse technologies and put them like at use in a profession way would be one thing I'm thinking about, like making a good professional trainer, I guess.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's your teaching presence, right? That's exactly your teaching presence. How do you use the, you know, the question for me, I think Dorcas or Hsin, shall I use your other name?
That's really hard. Yeah, but you made it.
How do you use the technologies that students already have, okay, that teachers already have, your teacher educators? How do you use, as you know, your teaching presence is in terms of not providing them technology, but how do you use what they bring in that they already have toward your pedagogical goals, right? That's your teaching presence. That's how you think about, you know, how do you harvest that? And so that's the thinking that has to go into your teaching presence, not your teacher presence. Your teacher presence is what I'm doing right now, which is saying, everybody use Zoom, right? Regardless, I mean, that's really, you know, something that you know, can only work one or twice, but with the reality is that bring your own device. Students have their own thingy, you know, that they can bring to the table. So as part of your teaching presence is how to harvest that. And so, other thoughts from Beishada? Okay. All right. So if not, you know, I'll share. You know, I was going to, you know, bring some concluding thoughts because it's already 10 o'clock, and I know you have work to do. But one of the things that somebody asked here, is co-creating also essential to offline teacher learning? I think Pei Laoshi asked that. Of course it is, right? Of course, co-creation. But now, you know, with all the, you know, everything that I say online should make sense offline as well. But when you're thinking about what's available online right now, teachers don't want you to give stuff. They want to be able to share, and you know, they because they can put a website together, because they can engage in one website, Wiechat, right? All those things they can now. So they want to be able to use that as their form of learning. It's a form, to some extent, individualized learning. They want to be able to co-create because that's part of the process of learning, right? They don't want to go into a professional development and just be given stuff. That happens as well. But they also, to make it meaningful, they must also be able to use what they have in their hands to engage in their own learning. And because they have many things in their hands right now, they have the computer, they have their phone. What can they do to co-create their own learning? I mean, to some extent, we're all already doing that. We're taking ownership of our own learning. We're looking at websites. We're looking at for friends to chat with us, right? All these engagements. And so, you know, I'll speak for a few more minutes and conclude the session by having you think with us, right? If you know, what does this mean for us as teachers at this point in time? And so, going back to that slide, you know, how have the current tools reconceptualized us as teachers and as teacher educators, right? And if you think about it in reality, you know, we're at this point in time whereby we're trans classroom teachers. We're not face-to-face teachers. You know, we're in between. We're both. We're face-to-face teachers and we're online teachers as well. We're in this liminal space whereby we're working with two modes of teaching simultaneously, right? And so this is where we are at this point in time in our lives. And so, you know, one of the consequences for that is that it has made, you know, I hope some of the things that we talked about has made you think about who you are as a teacher, right? And you know, and so one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, is that pedagogy now, you know, is some, and it's always been important, but, you know, one of the things that I hope that that this session has shown is that it's just not technology, it's the pedagogy. Why are we using the tools? What, you know, where are we taking them? What's valuable? What's worth knowing? How are students learning? How do we capture what students are the way students are learning? This online. This is, you know, the essence of pedagogy, right? And the other thing is that the idea of teaching presence, right? And that has to be, that is a dominant feature of online teaching. It's, you know, teacher presence, us being here, is not as important as us designing the online environment so that students can take charge of their own learning. Now, the other thing I think with the online medium is what happens is that because teaching presence is such a huge element of online teaching, front-loading preparation. One of the things that when I first started doing this, and I first started teaching online in 2004, you know, what people are reluctant to teach online because one of the things, you know, that sometimes that is a stumbling block is how much front-loading work has to be done, because teaching presence is front-loading the design. Everything has to happen, you know, way ahead of time. And I know at this point in time, you know, with emergency teaching, we didn't have a lot of front-loading time. But this is one of the challenges that people have in terms of online teaching, how much time they have to think about teaching presence. You just cannot walk into the classroom, right, and you know, have students do X, Y, and Z. Teaching presence is a huge element of online teaching, and room has to be made for that. And so the other thing about online teaching is the realization that what happens out of class and what happens in class, you know, come together. So in a sense, what students have access, teachers have access, informal learning, was all of that is happening in their other outside lives, you know, become much more prominent also in your teaching. It's not just the classroom, it's everything else that's happening. And informal learning is such a huge element of online teaching because a lot of the teaching is not with us present, it's with us not present. And so that's something I think that, you know, that has become, you know, quite prominent. But I don't want to go on because there's a lot more that we can talk about. I just want us to kind of open it up to questions so that we have a little bit of time. I allocated about half an hour for discussions, for questions that we can kind of talk about and think about together, because I can kind of go on forever here, but I just want to be sure that we have enough time to discuss issues, to discuss thoughts and ideas about online pedagogy in this environment. So I'm going to stop share. This is with the Superman poster, right? I teach. What's your superpower? So what are our superpowers in teaching online? What's happening in your environment? Can we discuss some of that? So I'll open it to the floor. Okay, I'll share what has come up in terms of your online teaching.
Yeah, let's just invite some of the teachers who has the experiences of online teaching, because of this semester we have to have our courses supervising both online. Everything is online. Conference like this, lectures, maybe not lecture, it's a kind of discussion online. So what are your experiences? What are your puzzles? What are your questions? Yeah, what are the challenges? So yeah, whatever that you would like to share here, just welcome. Yeah, it is the time.
So Wang has that question about teacher agency, right? How do you increase teacher agency? You know, and you know, it's one of those things whereby you have to think about, you know, the teacher. When I talk about, and I hate to go back to the idea of teaching presence. Teaching presence is the idea that, you know, when you think about your online teaching, the design of your online classroom, the thought has to go into teaching presence, right? And I think the previous thinking about I can walk into the classroom and teach what I've taught before, you know, because I'm in there, I can attend to students. Right now, in online teaching, students go in the classroom without you. And so the teacher agency has to come into teaching presence. How do you set it up, you know, ahead of time so that when students come in, they know what to do? So agency right now, I think in terms of online discussion, when we talk about, you know, we have to focus on what teachers need to do so that their student agency, right? How can they take charge of their own learning? What about how we need to, in terms of teacher agency, we're talking about reigniting, reaching students so that they can do work without us. It's, you know, teacher agency is teacher motivation. How do they take charge? But right now, we need to think about how do we design our students, our classroom environment, so that students can take charge of their own learning, because we're not always there. And so it's not a direct response to your question, but I'm trying to shift the discussion a little bit to what we're doing, because teacher agency can be a huge discussion. But right now, what's important in terms of what we're trying to say in this discussion is that if you think about teacher education, teacher training, teacher development, one of the things we need to focus on is that how do you develop a sense of competency so that teachers can design the environment so that their students will know what to do when they come into the classroom, because the teachers are not always there. The teachers cannot control materials. The teachers cannot control what students get access to, because they get that on their own. So how can we help teachers design the classroom so that when they do come into the online setting, they can bring to the fore whatever they have to continue their own learning, to continue learning that is most meaningful to them. Not so much directed by us, but so much to using the resources that they have. So it's sort of a convoluted answer, but developing a way for students to take charge of their own learning, that's where our focus now is online teachers. So I think the next question is, have you come across cases where teachers do not use technology, right, when they're doing online teaching? What are your comments regarding this? How do you see the future of online teaching versus face-to-face teaching. You know, that in terms of teachers not using technology, if their pedagogy is right, they don't have to use much technology. They can use WeChat, right? And Natalia is here. We use, in Costa Rica, we use WhatsApp, right? And because that's all that students had access to, and that's all their teachers could manage at that point in time is WhatsApp. WhatsApp is like WeChat, right? And so they use one thing. But pedagogically, how is that teacher using it? For instance, the teacher is using it to engage students in communication using English, because they can do that. They can do back and forth, back and forth. Pedagogically, that teacher was focused on, values, informal communication, interactive communication. So that is what is pedagogically informing the teacher, right? Because of that, she was focusing on one application only, WhatsApp, and that was working for her. But as long as pedagogically she understands why that tool is useful for her and how she could use it to attain her goals of language teaching, that's sufficient because her pedagogy is there. She doesn't need a whole lot of tools. She can find other tools if she has other needs, but pedagogically, that was what she was after. And so that's, yes, in other words, yes, we've seen teachers only using one technology or whatever, that's pretty normal. We're using Zoom, right? But pedagogically, it's important for us to engage with you in Zoom so that we can connect with you in terms of the questions that you have. So that's why we're using only this technology. What is the future of online teaching? Is that what the question is? The future is that, we are doing both face-to-face and online teaching. Since I became a professor, I've always had a blended load. I've never just taught face-to-face. I've always taught online as well. And so if you're in this job that we have right now, we're going to be engaged online regardless. And one of the things that will happen down the road is that some of the fundamental elements of teaching will be taken up, will be online. We meet in a setting, online in a sense that, for instance, in math classes here, the math 101, math or media math, all of that is online. When you have simultaneous communication is when people come together to talk about, issues or to talk about problems that push them to a different place. But all of the foundational type of things all happen online right now. Because the students do it themselves to build that knowledge. So I guess, in terms of, and then you also have AI, artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence online too will do the fundamental basic stuff, laying the fundamental basic, but the soft scaffolding is when you have live interaction like this. The hard scaffolding will be done, without us. We just put the information there, but the soft scaffolding is when we have interactions like this, using Zoom, using all the other facilities that we have. I don't know whether I'm answering that question directly, but, in terms of the future of online teaching for us as language educators, the future, we will be doing both. There's no face-to-face learning is by itself, I don't think is there anymore. We're both online and face-to-face teachers. That's the nature of us as educators. And we're doing that already. We're living the future. How do you see the future? Okay. All right. So anybody else wants to add? Renee or Chao or anybody else is here?
Can I add a comment? I feel like my comment is related to teaching presence in general. Like from my own observations, I see like one concern of the instructors or language especially language education instructors, have is that we can no longer build up personal relationships in virtual environment. I mean, like, we can no longer pat on students' back when they're sad. We can't like spot like having that live interaction with students. And the lack of security in that sense makes some of the instructors, and including me, resisting the idea of somehow like converting to online like teaching platform. But the thing is, from the previous literature, I do see like in online environment, there are like more advantages we haven't seen. For example, students are more open to sensitive topics. They are willing to demonstrate their autonomy, or are willing to bring their personal environments, personal experiences to the classroom.
Mhm.
So I guess my point here is like, first of all, we can't just thinking in that way of like we're going to have a hard landing plan, just as like hard scaffolding, I guess, like just have that part of teacher's presence. And just think to make the virtual environment as much similar or as much alike the face-to-face environment we're having. It's just like totally different. And secondly, just because of that, we definitely, as professional scholars, we definitely need some theoretical scaffoldings to help us to contextualize where we are and thinking from the starting point and individualize our own teaching context, and just trying to help ourselves and our students and our classes to be more of a multimodal version, 21st century version learning and teaching environment and experience. That's my point.
Right. I mean, I think 2 points I want to say. One is that, you know, the idea of social presence, you know, is something also that is part of online teaching. And part of what social presence is, you know, how do you project yourself authentic, you know, as a person online? And that's another subject of discussion. And, you know, I mean, that we can talk about, you know, in another session, but that's something that I think is huge in online teaching. But then again, you know, all of it, I'm being funny here, not so serious, but people fall in love online, right? You can do a lot of things online. You know, I've had 6 people in my classes, and I can report, that met in my online classes, you know, and they eventually got married. So we're doing something online that's projecting affective, you know, our emotions, our connection. There's something there that can happen online, right? And we can talk about that in a separate session. So the idea of social presence, affective presence, you know, people are connecting online. There's something that we can capitalize on that in terms of language teaching. And which is, you know, people have written about that as well in terms of language teaching via online means, how you project social presence, how you connect with others via social presence. And so I think Dorcas or Hsin has raised that as a point of something to consider in another discussion. The other is that when students ask me about the difference between face-to-face, you know, how, you know, the complaint that I always get is, you know, I cannot see you. I would love to see you face-to-face, right? You know, I cannot do that online. One of the things that I always talk about is that online do other things that's different from face-to-face. You know, if you judge online teaching based on what you can do face-to-face, you're going to find the online medium, you know, insufficient. And the vice versa is the same. If you compare face-to-face teaching, what online can do, you're going to find face-to-face teaching insufficient. They, you know, although they complement each other, they have also different strengths. There's, you know, online teaching can do certain things, you know, but it cannot hug you. But face-to-face can do certain things, but it cannot give you the connectivity that the online medium allows you. So, you know, finding ways to have those two complement each other, I think, going back to that question that somebody asked, is the way that we move forward. But, you know, emotions and connections are possible online because we see this happening on a day-to-day basis, right? In terms of, you know, social media, in terms of whatever it is. So, you know, although this is not the right session to talk about it, social presence online and how we harvest that in terms of language teaching, you know, it's a subject of huge discussion and huge research at this point in time that we can also engage in down the road. Yeah. Let me see what other questions. Social presence, right? Brian was saying social emotional form of teaching and learning. Yeah. Anything else to share and to bring in as a subject of this? What's in your reality in Beijing Normal when you work with teachers? What's happening? What are some of the new awarenesses? Song Huan, you're there as well?
We got a new question here.
Okay. How do teachers encourage students' interaction between each other in online learning? They are tired. Yes, and teachers are tired too. Teachers are tired too. You know, I mean, I think you see on screen. So, you know, teachers online. You know, how do you motivate? Now, you know, I have a book here called. Oh, I don't have a book. Called Adding Tech Variety. You know, when you think about that, you think about, you know, the sense of, you know, there are many, obviously we can talk about this in another session, but I want to go back to what I just said earlier, which is one of the most motivating things I've seen online is that when you allow them to use what they have, like for instance, devices. You know, like for instance, when I'm working with students and teachers, you know, they're always like Chao, Renee, and Dorcas, and Natalia, and Faisal. They all have so much to offer. But when we come together and I say, what have you got? What can you, you know, show me what you got. Teach me Qualtrics. Teach me something. This is what motivates them. When we as teacher educators, you know, allow the co-construction, allow them to bring what they have, to use what they have in our classroom. We're all tired, right? But, you know, I mean, you're tired teaching face-to-face too, right? But when you talk about motivation, going back to what I said earlier, if you allow students to use the devices or to use the connections that they have in the classroom, that makes the classroom a bit more meaningful because it personalizes the instruction. It allows them also to co-create the learning in the classroom, right? Allow the, you know, if they're able to bring new connections into the classroom, new things that they have that they've met somewhere that, you know, that they've learned on Wiechart into the classroom, you know, it's motivating. This is not so different from teaching face-to-face, right? But in a sense, right, when you talk about online motivation, you're thinking again pedagogically. What motivates my students face-to-face? The sense of being acknowledging what they bring to the classroom, using the devices, learning from them, you know, what they've used in their personal lives. You know, one of the things that I love the most about teaching online teachers is that I can reach teachers as they're teaching. They can, you know, they can raise questions about what's happening in their classroom as they're teaching, rather than pulling them out of the classroom. I can say to the teachers, what's happening in their classroom? Are you testing these ideas? Using grounded information, using the technology so that we can bring forth what's actually happening in the classroom is motivating, right? And this is not so much different from teaching face-to-face, but the online technology allows us to connect with the grounded experience of our students, of our teachers, allowing them to bring the question just in time into the classroom. That's what's motivating. You know, it's not abstracting. We're not talking about the abstract. We're talking about what's grounded in students' realities. And that's what the online medium allows us to do. And so So it's not, you know, I have no magic answers, but, you know, I'm just thinking about what's most meaningful to me as a person, being able to bring what is, you know, what I have to the floor. And the online medium allows me to do that so much better than just the face-to-face, whereby I'm distanced from my reality. Teaching online students, you can connect to students' reality as it happens. So now, someone was asking, how do we design self-regulated learning? Now, that's a perfect question. I know we don't have time for that, but the team that you have here from Indiana University that's here on the Zoom session, we're working on self-regulated learning called learning presence, right? How do we establish that? And part of self-regulated learning is one of the things I mentioned earlier in this discussion, which is something along the lines of, you know, role enactment, right? You're giving, you know, self-regulated learning can be, for example, assigning those roles to students so that they know what to do when they come into the classroom. That's one example. Sung-Hwan, you want to say something? I heard your voice. Okay. Sung-Hwan? Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you type your comment because we're not having a good connection with you? In other words, we can't hear you.
Seems that the internet doesn't work well. To someone. Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
I tried to reconnect. Okay. We can't hear you. Now you can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just use the VPN of the BNU, so maybe it doesn't work. Yeah, because this semester I have the course about the Chinese language teaching methods, because it's online teaching, and I want to design self-regulated learning activities for all the master students, because I think the online teaching not just to give the lecture in online, and then I can design some of the learning activity for the students to do themselves. So this is my question. I think your lecture, your presentation is very perfect for us. You know, it's give us some of the experience and very good ideas for our online teaching design. So thanks so much for your presentation.
You're welcome. And I think one of the things, you know, Renee, Chao, Natalia, and us, and Faisal and Dorcas, we're a team of 7 people doing this research, establishing learning presence, and exactly addressing what you just asked is how do we establish, you know, self-regulated learning, you know, and learner presence, especially at the higher levels. You know, how do we set this up? And so this is what we're studying. We're looking at practices that people do in terms of understanding how this is done. And so, but the example I gave is one of them is that, you know, for instance, role enactments, having students self-code their own participation. And, you know, these are the things, you know, you put the responsibilities on the students, you know, but it's more guided, you're guiding them. You're teaching to guide them so that they know what to do when they get to the classroom without you. So, you know.
As you know, and we also wanted to do the research is just based on this course. It's kind of like the action research, and we want to design such kind of the learning activities or teaching activities, and we also collect the data from the students' participation or the students, their job, their work. And we want to use the evidence or the database to, maybe to do some curriculum design, or we can do some the curriculum improvements. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we're finding out is that with this remote teaching, this emergency teaching, our curriculum, we're designing as we go with our students, and so because and this is how we have to operate now, in a sense that teachers will say, because we're teacher educators, right? And teachers will say, we don't have enough resources, and so we established this quickly. This spreadsheet of resources for students to use, so that it's not just coming from us, it's coming from teachers contributing. And I'll send you the link at this point in time. I haven't even shared it with my own students, but we established this so that all teachers can contribute to these resources. And so this is another way whereby it's crowdsourcing. The idea of connecting, learning through connection. And so this is what we're doing. So 3 weeks ago, when we're in this situation, we say, let's go online teaching. And teachers say, we don't know. And so we created this spreadsheet for people to contribute all the resources that they're using so that they can use it. That's a perfect example of teachers self-regulated learning, crowdsourcing, and curriculum development on the go. We can't provide it all, but everybody join in, so that we can create this curriculum together. That's where we are at this time. And so, it's really it's both challenging, but boy, it is so interesting.
That's right. It's interesting, but also means difficult. You should have to overcome. It's really difficult for us,
Yeah, it is very difficult for us as well. And before we end, because I know time is past, I will say that there has not been an ordinary day since this crisis started for all of us. Every day something else happens that we had not anticipated. And so there has not been an ordinary day, and 70% of us, of our teachers, the people I'm working with, have not taught online. So they cannot be an ordinary day. We're learning something new each day. And it's been challenging, no doubt, but it brings us together like we are now. So for that, I thank you for this opportunity.
No, thanks so much for your contribution. You very support our online teaching. It's very important for us. Yeah.
I love
so much.
So thank you so much. Faye, you want to say concluding comments?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Actually, it's like Faridah just mentioned, it is an ordinary period, and we have such kind of unordinary, connecting online, and we're talking about online pedagogy, especially for higher education, for the teacher education. So that's great opportunity. I don't know others, but I myself just really learned a lot about how the pedagogy matters instead of the technology. Technology is only just to help us to realize our pedagogy. What we mean it is worthwhile for both the students and us, and how we just have the connection, how we just co-created not only with the student and among the students themselves. So I guess that is really good timing that we have you here and to share all the information, not all, but some of the information that is very crucial to us at this period. Thank you so much for this sharing. So may I just have one more thing before we finish? May I just ask Chao or some other students that have your email or WeChat, then we can have the record of this session or the PowerPoint that we can share with the participants here within China.
裴老师，超然已经加我的微信了，我们两个。
Okay, great. Oh, Okay, thank you so much. So I hope some after the event, after this serious event, we can just have you back on campus.
I hope
Sure.
so.
Yes.
I feel like BNU is like my second campus. And so
Okay. So welcome
Great.
the autumn semester.
thank you.
Yeah.
I hope to bring my students with me too one of these
Please,
Yes.
please
Yeah.
just bring
Please,
all your,
yes.
yeah, all the 2 students coming back, yeah, to the country. Yes, yes. And take care, please.
Thank
Yeah,
you
take
so
care.
much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. We
Bye
appreciate
bye.
the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. And
Bye.
safely home.
Good night.
Yeah. Bye.
Good
Bye
night.
Have a
bye.
great day.
You too. Have a good night. Yeah.
Good night.
Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.